Good afternoon, everybody. You're welcome to the session with the intriguing title of Desires Delivered in the Experience Economy. In the original book, it said that Hans Talbauer would be giving this presentation, but instead he was sick this week, so I have the pleasure of giving this presentation. My name is Richard Howell, and I'll be doing it jointly with Andy Hancock. So first of all, Richard Howell from SAP. I'm responsible for our digital supply chain solutions, and I'll explain what that is as we go through. And Andy?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Andy Hancock. I'm the North American lead for Innovation and Industry 4.0 for SAP.
And this is the first example you will see of Brexit, because it's taken two British people now. We've been devalued. It's two British people to replace one Austrian. But like our prince, we're very much like him because we've both moved to the Americas. So Prince Harry's there, so are we now. I'm based in Boston. I've been there for about 25 years, and I've been working for SAP for 15 years. And what we wanted to talk about today is, first of all, about some of the supply chain challenges, around the complexity of supply chains that we're all facing today, around the fact that of all of the different challenges that we're facing around the things like trade wars, the borders closing because of different viruses, which is going to have a significant impact on supply chains in the next few months, or could have a significant impact. And Brexit is another example of the changing environment that we're working in. And we're dealing with demanding customers who are always looking for more and always more informed and always more connected. And they are also driving to us to push sustainability initiatives across our business processes. They want to buy sustainable products. And we're dealing with a complex supply chain, a global supply chain. And all of these are factoring in to the different supply chain challenges. But I wanted to start and talk a little bit about what we mean when we say desires delivered in the experience economy. In today's world, everyone is looking for a great customer experience. And my kids are great examples of today's buyer. They see it online. They want it immediately. They click on like it on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever social platform they're using, and they order it instantaneously online and get it within 2 days. And they're going to be the business leaders of tomorrow. Not my kids, obviously, because I don't know what they're going to be. But children in general, normal children, are going to be the business leaders of tomorrow. And and they're going to expect the same type of thing. And we are all that consumer. And in business, we expect quicker responses. And we have to be able to have our supply chains, whether we're dealing with the end consumer or whether we're a level below them or 2 levels below them in the supply chain, that passes down and adds more demands on our manufacturing processes, regardless of what industry you're in. And when we talk about desires, we're not just talking about customer desires. We're talking about employee desires. Employees want to work for ethical companies. They want to have a purpose when they go to work, especially the younger generation who don't stay for 20 years at a company. They leave after 2 years and look for the next best thing. So you need to be able to satisfy their desires on an ongoing basis and give them the tools and the technologies and the solutions that help them do their job better and make it engaging and interesting for them to come to work. Shareholders. As a shareholder, I also have desires. I want more profitable growth. I want to make money on return on my investment. And also, we're always seeing increasing environmental desires. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a little while. So when we talk about digital supply chain at SAP, it's first important to set the scene of what we talk about. We talk about everything from designing the R&D department, through manufacturing, through logistics, and the operations or maintenance departments who maintain facilities or maintain assets in the field, depending on the type of products that you manufacture. And the planning process across all of those, the integrated business planning processes across those. We're going to focus more for the discussion as we get into the details around manufacturing and asset management and Industry 4.0 and the IT-OT convergence, which has been a constant theme of this session, and that's where Andy will go into a bit more detail. But when we see what companies are looking for a state-of-the-art supply chain, a supply chain of the future, a digitized supply chain, we see 4 main things that companies are looking to address. They need to drive customer-centric business processes. They need to improve visibility across a global network and have visibility across a global business network and collaborate across a global network. They're looking to improve productivity and throughput through automation, through predictive capabilities. And they want to drive sustainability. And I'm going to touch on these 4 things before we get into the detailed discussion around the other areas. Because when we talk about a customer centricity, you always think about a great customer experience. And I use my children as examples a lot when I talk. And my son, last year, he was captain of the basketball team in Medfield, Massachusetts, if anyone's from Massachusetts. And he wanted to order a new pair of sneakers. And 2 weeks before the start of the season, he went online and he wanted Medfield blue, which is actually Carolina blue. He wanted his name, he wanted his number, and he wanted the C for captain on the sneaker. And he placed that order in about 10 minutes, no problem. Great order experience. Clicked confirm, and it said 6 weeks for delivery. And that just goes to show that it's not just the order experience, it's a great customer experience. The supply chains that enable that experience are equally as important, if not more important. Because you have to be able to provide a great, first of all, I think it doesn't even start with a great order experience. It starts with a great design experience of designing the products that companies want, of customers want, of, if, for example, individualization is a key goal for your company, to have the business processes in place to design an individualized product or a configurable product that can be customized. It involves a great delivery experience. If I order it to arrive between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock on Tuesday at my house, it has to arrive between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock at my house on Tuesday. Otherwise, it's a bad customer experience in general. And more, we're looking for a great service experience. My kids have never bought a CD or a DVD. In fact, I said to them once, they've never bought a record, and they say, "What's a record?" And I said, "It's like a CD." And they said, "What's a CD?" Because everything's streaming. They don't buy things anymore, they buy a service. And we're seeing examples of business-to-business transactions with an as-a-service model, more and more. And you have to have a new way of designing your supply chains and running your supply chains to provide that service. If, for example, you want to have a service and pay something based on usage, you have to have sensors on those pieces of equipment that are sold to your customer to capture that information. You need to know how many hours it's been used, what's the throughput of that machine. And equally, because that's how you build it. You build somebody every month. But equally important, you need to know if that machine is breaking down or it's calibrating to going out of calibration. It's trending towards a breakdown. Because if the machine breaks down, if that asset breaks down, nobody's happy. Your customer isn't happy because they can't use the product or the asset. You're not happy because you're not getting paid. So you have to have the intelligence built into those assets for the purpose of what your business outcome is. So supply chains, when it talks about customer centricity, are key enablers of closing what they call the experience gap, the perception of what a company thinks their customer experience is versus what their customers actually think their experience is. When we talk about visibility, we really are working in a global supply chain. We need end-to-end visibility across every step in the supply chain, all the way through the raw materials to the finished product and ultimately to the customer. And increasingly, I bet you there's not one company in here that manufactures everything themselves and then ships everything themselves and designs everything themselves. You're all reliant on a network of some sort. And we have networks of suppliers for materials and packaging material. We have networks for designing products where we bring our key suppliers and contract manufacturers into the design process. We have networks for manufacturing where many products are outsourced manufactured through contract manufacturers, and we need to have visibility across those networks. And increasingly, as our assets that we manufacture and sell become smarter, we have asset networks where we can share that type of information about the asset so that you've got a central database where the customer can get value and data of how that product is performing. You can get information about how that product is performing. And a maintenance department could get information about, or a maintenance company who you may subcontract to can get information about how that product is performing. And you can make business decisions based on that shared knowledge across all of the assets that you sell to your customers or service for your customers. So the value of the network and visibility is critical. The other thing is around visibility is the data. We have no shortage of data. We have data everywhere. You get data from the IoT devices, you get data from customers, you get data from everywhere. The value of visibility is putting the data in the business context and in a role-based business context to better serve me to do, bless you, for me to do my job, for Andy to do his job, or somebody else to do their job. If I work in a production plant and I'm responsible for this production line, I need very detailed information about that production line. If Andy is the plant manager, he needs information about all of the production lines or production cells, depending on your manufacturing process, but at a slightly higher level. And then somebody else may be in charge of operations, and they want another level of abstraction. They want to have visibility of all of the plants, and then be able to drill down to the details when required. If there's a specific issue, they want to know where their problems are or where their opportunities are, and then drill down and find out more about them, and go to the details where they need it. So it's the same base information, but aggregated in different levels based on your role. And that's what visibility is across the network. When we talk about productivity, and Andy will go into this in a lot more detail, you go around this event and you hear Industry 4.0, Industrial IoT, smart factories, intelligent manufacturing. All of these are terms that are analogous to each other in many ways. But we think that when we talk about Industry 4.0, we talk about intelligent assets. I saw somewhere at one of the booths as well. We're really talking about providing intelligence and digitizing your end-to-end processes, your supply chain. It starts with factories in many cases and having automation across the factories and having intelligence within the factories. But what you really want to do there is drive data-driven business processes, both across the factory and across the supply chain. But it starts with intelligent products. If we design more intelligent products in the R&D phase, as we design and put more intelligence into the assets as we manufacture them, then that can feed information from across the supply chain. And as I said, I won't go into any more detail because Andy's going to cover that in a little while. And ultimately, you get more empowered people because the data that's coming from all of these sources ultimately provides a tool for me as a user to do my job better, or Andy as a manager to do his job better. And finally, we want to drive sustainable processes. Every company in here, I pretty much can bet, will have sustainability somewhere within their company's goals and purposes, or to reduce their carbon footprint, or to be carbon neutral, or carbon positive in some cases. And supply chains are a key cause of these issues, but they're also a key opportunity to improve your carbon footprint, your sustainability index. And it starts all the way through from designing sustainable products, of sourcing ethically sourced materials, of leveraging manufacturing processes that track and capture and analyze their carbon emissions, on the logistics side of ensuring that you have improved logistics processes, you ensured full truckloads, you eliminate dead miles, and also look for alternative sources of distribution, and also network design of how to better design your network and position inventory in the right places to reduce your carbon footprint around the logistics processes. And it's all enabled, as I mentioned before, from design to operate, and having end-to-end solutions that integrate from the design process, the handover to manufacturing, into the logistics processes, and have planning across all of those, and also the maintenance that fits in both from a manufacturing standpoint and an asset maintenance standpoint at your customers' sites. And with that, I'll hand over to Andy to cover in a bit more detail the topics of Industry 4.0.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. So what we wanted to do, we talked about desires delivered at a high level, was really now, okay, what's SAP's perspective around Industry 4.0 and what that means, and also going one step deeper into what capabilities we have around asset performance management as well. See, what we really see with our customers is that there's still a lot of siloed transactions that are going on in the business, and with that are data stores and business units that are not really talking to each other. So what we want to achieve is bridge that gap from a transactional process to data-driven processes. And what we can see from the diagram is that, so when we talk about Industry 4.0, we're really just looking at the 4 themes that we've defined that sit across the entire enterprise, not just in the supply chain, but also in your back office and front office sales environment. And this is where we start to talk about joining supply chain with Industry 4.0 and experience management. We then have layers of technology from our platform colleagues around artificial intelligence, machine learning, the data hubs, the data warehousing that we have, and then the ability to both have hybrid on-premise and cloud environments. But when we think about Industry 4.0, we really got to change the focus from a feature and function that we're very strong on into really use case-based scenarios. So we're looking at handling over information between engineering and manufacturing. We're looking at prescriptive, predictive maintenance around the assets, and really looking at providing ad hoc decision-making capability to everybody. So they're not just talking about the C-level suite in the office, but also all the way down to the operator, to the engineer that is taking those rounds on a mobile device. So when we see that, as I mentioned before, the challenges that we have is that transactional business processes have that data silos and those disconnected processes. So we're moving from a manufacturing area into a logistics area, and in parallel, there may be some asset management on those particular assets that are producing that product. We see that, when there's lack of standardization, there is a lack of agility to change with volatile markets. So the example that we have was that Fender brought out a limited edition guitar with Red Hot Chili Peppers. They guesstimated that they would maybe sell 2,000, 5,000 of these particular guitars. But what they forgot was the social impact of the 8 million followers that the lead guitarist has. As soon as he tweeted the new guitar, Fender had 50,000 orders for this guitar. But the problem was there was absolutely no way to actually maintain that, and that demand signal quickly disappeared when they realized it may take 3 to 4 years to actually receive the guitar itself. And the key thing is, when we talk about insight without action, there are a lot of dashboards available. There's spreadsheets. Everybody can pull data and put it in a pretty graph. But there really is a delayed reaction with actually seeing that information and actually bringing it back down into operations to act upon it. And that's where we see, the strong business processes that SAP have is that we can consume that sensor data from those machines and actually bring those up into actionable insights. From a COO, they have a slightly different view of their challenges around Industry 4.0. It's their financial performance. They need to control costs, but still be in a place to introduce innovation. That's where we go back to Richard's story about the sneakers. Customer satisfaction is really high in a manufacturing scenario, to deliver on those expectations, but still provide a quality of product. We're seeing, with the more modular designs within plants, so if we take Audi's engine plant, where they actually have module production plants, people are starting to look at plant as a capability rather than it just produces widget A in plant A, in widget B in plant B. They're really saying, well, can I actually bring its semi-finished goods and move that around as a capacity around the globe? They're also thinking, am I stuck with the decision I make? So when we think about CapEx expenditures, so okay, then the next 5 years, we're going to make a decision, making an investment in that direction. With such a fast pace of the change of market at the moment, really they want, what was good a decision today, next year might actually be not, there may be a better one. So people are moving from this CapEx to an OpEx perspective. And then, sustainability, employee safety, and what is the environmental impact? I was at a customer just before Christmas, and they're reviewing their carbon footprint policy. How do you get the information to actually make a decision to change it? And that is pulling relevant information from the shop floor and from other data sources and bringing that up into a place that I can have that insight with. It is always interesting, and this is, a new buying center from an SAP perspective. I mean, the people that you may know, SAP, we have very strong relationships at the C-level suite, CIO, IT department. But what we're seeing is that, the plant manager is having more and more power and is actually driving decisions in the plant. And what we have to support them in that is that, when they're looking at standardization, for instance, OEE, or how do I minimize my unplanned downtime, how can we support them as a software vendor to provide that capability? We are seeing, the lack of retaining of employees. So there was a Midwest company, as you can imagine, in the middle of nowhere. They were struggling to find nighttime staff because they prefer to work at Uber and Lyft or the local convenience store rather than do the midnight shift in a factory. So we've seen that actually drive automation in the shop in these particular manufacturing areas. And then, a key thing for them is this end-to-end live data integration. It's like, how can I, what commitments do I have? What do I need to do for resetting? Can I simulate particular scenarios? This is where SAP and their software can provide those business processes in order to run those simulations right there when they need it. So yes, I've talked about, this is the high level, but what is practical terms are we as SAP helping support our customers in the Industry 4.0 space? And we're actually developing what we call Industry 4.0 hubs, which if anybody's been to Hannover Messe, SAP has a very large presence where we bring a lot of our hardware partners and automation vendors. So we have AVLs, we have Evo mixes, for instance, and we actually do a full end-to-end scenario of a discrete manufacturing. I think this year we're both doing discrete and process. And the idea is that we're going to take that capability that we have at Hannover Messe and bring it into North America in Newtown Square. So we will be able to provide, showcase capability, but also provide things to support experts. So actually explore the scenarios in Industry 4.0 that you would have. And we're employing actually people that are, experts at PLC programming into the integration layer. So we'll be able to actually be quicker to respond to the demand that a plant manager may need, but also satisfying the C-level suite with capability. We're also going to be creating online courses for people to be certified on them, and also really support those early adopters with pilot projects in their own facility across the United States and the rest of the world. We're also creating one in Waldorf near Frankfurt in Germany and in Tokyo in Japan. There are several others that are due to be released later on in the year, and we're looking at our partner community to develop their own Industry 4.0 hubs as well. When we talk about, SAP is traditionally a software vendor, and we're not in the hardware space. So we understand the importance of having collaboration and standardization. So we're part of Open Industry 4.0 Alliance, where with our partners and our hardware partners, we can then provide an easy method of ingestion of data from the hardware into the software space, which we then can use our business processes to then make insightful outcomes. So I wanted to go into one step further, which is really around asset management and APM, so asset performance management, and really describe where we are at, because this is a new growth area for us as well. And what we see is really that, customers really are over-maintaining their asset with a time-based maintenance schedule, and we're supporting them to move into an RCM strategy as well as a prescriptive maintenance strategy. And I say prescriptive rather than predictive because the definition of prescriptive is all available data. And if you're a customer of SAP, you'll have petabytes of historical data that are sitting in data warehouses. We're designing capability to actually data mine back into the work orders and notifications. So the work requests that are created on these assets to then start to give simple things like mean time between repair, mean time between failure. So you can start to understand the demand signal in your spare parts and in inventory to plan further and further ahead. On the right-hand side, and this is where I get to use my wonderful thing. Let's see if it's going to work. Ooh, you're supposed to go, ooh. We've basically built out a product that will support the development of your maintenance strategy. So we can go as high as RCM, so reliability-centered maintenance. We could support failure mode effective analysis, and then we can gradually go all the way down to run to fail. So the idea is using criticality and risk-based inspections, we can determine what maintenance strategy you should apply to this particular asset. And then we can do a planned maintenance review to determine what your as-is status of that particular maintenance strategy and the future state. So when we talk about enterprise asset management, we have a sub-product portfolio called Intelligent Asset Management, which basically is a combination of our ERP system and our S4 with our asset performance management capability. As Richard mentioned, we also have an asset intelligent network that helps us move into a collaboration space with our operators, OEM manufacturers, and service providers. And the purpose of this is that lots of companies are trying to look for new revenue streams, whether or not that's just going from selling a piece of equipment to a pay-per-use, a leasing methodology. We have a very successful company in Germany called Kaiser Compressor that moved from selling compressor units into selling compressed air at a particular pressure. So that they could then, what was in it for them was that they could then be very prescriptive with the amount of hardware that was on site, but also generate a new maintenance repair functionality within that lease. We also see, I've been at sites where I've seen, 900 access databases outside of the SAP data system. And it's really, how do we bring that through into a single source of truth? And this is where the intelligent asset management enables you to basically collect information as a focal point, so not just planned maintenance information, but health and safety documents that you may have that don't outside of that, release notifications that are created from the manufacturer. We also see, it's like there's always seems to be, a delay between analytics capability and actually that real-time data. So we're more and more allowing, we're actually seeing digitally born assets. So assets from the design phase that have a method of communicating back to the mothership. what we're doing is allowing that to percolate up into an SAP user's environment so that they can see the real-time health of those particular assets. And all of it is really to move away from that reactive calendar-based maintenance into a prescriptive, predictive scenario. So when we talk about the portfolio in depth, on the right-hand side, we basically have our various sections within it. So if you take the top one in the middle, asset strategy and performance, this is basically, as I was mentioning, is define that maintenance strategy. On the left-hand side, we have the asset network and collaboration, which is all about collaborating both external stakeholders, but also internal stakeholders. So version controls, we do model templates, so we can basically maintain particular ISO standards, and then actually propagate that out into multiple ERP systems if required. We then have asset health prediction and optimization. And this is where we really have a differentiator in this space. So not only are we talking about predictive algorithms, so principal component analysis, Earth meters distance, but we're moving into physical simulation. So we can actually do finite element analysis on our assets and apply virtual sensors to that to then see what an asset would run like in the next 10 years. We then also have the capability of a mobile application, so that point of performance is keeping that digital to digital. So a lot of customers, are still running around creating pieces of paper, and information gets left, and it takes a long time to actually get back into the system. So by having that positive identification through RFID reader or barcode, you can capture the information in real time and get your actuals against your planned cost. In the middle there, we have the Asset Central Foundation, which, in the world of SAP, unsurprisingly, we have a technical component. This technical component, if you see that it comes included with all of the products, it is basically the glue between our cloud APM capability and our on-premise PM and S4. So this has the ability to both do synchronization, so updating the asset hierarchy in PM, but also it has the ability to be externally facing to actually outsource information to other systems or actually take systems in. It has about 500 APIs available to it. And this is where we see our partner community actually adding extensions in the Fury interface to provide capability in that space. So as we see, I just wanted to give you a list of basically all the different products that we had available to us. And then as you can see, right at the bottom, the execution and reporting. I just want to keep on pressing this button, really. We can see that we have our asset management capability in S4, our G-enablement framework, so our inclusion of Esri capability, linear asset management. And what it really is a full solution for enterprise asset management in the space. Now, we wanted to see if this next slide works. It's all about experience management. So can you try and scan that and see if we get this? Richard doesn't know this, so did it actually capture? That'd be a curiosity. So this is what I'm trying to explain within this space is the easiness of how we can get to the user base in order to start capturing useful experience. So it's your questions on Industry 4.0, by the way. So the idea is that, from an SAP perspective, we made a small acquisition last year called Qualtrics, which is all about, when we talk about experience management, it's all about how do I get a quick interaction with my customer base, with my employees, to actually understand how they feel, what information do you need to gather from them. So with this little questionnaire, we just ask a few questions around, are you deploying about Industry 4.0, and a few others. And so just to wrap up on our presentation before we take some questions, we just really wanted to go back and recap. So when we talk about design to operate, that is our digital supply chain core messaging. When we talk about Industry 4.0 in this space, basically every part of this particular point, whether or not it's the design, the manufacturer, the operator, has an element of Industry 4.0 running through it. And the idea is that we will continue to tightly integrate each one of these areas to then enable our customers to have the capability of Industry 4.0. And with that, I would like to open to questions, really. Well, then that would be a deadly silence. So, right. So
my question is not with manufacturing, but during the construction phase, tracking from procurement to out to, you may have 10 acres of laydown yards or 10 laydown yards over 100 acres. And so how do you track those assets during the construction phase of a project? And can you relate them back to a 3D model so you know where they go?
So one of our customers was using asset management to track the drills that they were using across a construction site. So they had visibility of where all the drills were, to make sure none went missing, first of all, but also from a maintenance perspective to ensure that they had the right material, the right equipment at the right place at the right time. There are other examples, not necessarily in construction, but in a large mine in Australia. They were tracking all the autonomous trucks that were driving around the facility and had visibility of every truck was at any point in time. And they discovered they were using driverless trucks, autonomous trucks, and they discovered that they were too precise, and they were driving exactly the same route every time, and they were making indents in the paths, and they had to be less precise driving afterwards. They had to adjust the equation so that they would be less precise when they were driving around and still stayed on the specific paths. But there's examples where we can track any type of asset is the answer to the question, as long as there is our sensors on board that asset that can be tracked.
And then within core SAP, we then obviously we have the capability from project planning, from proposal of capital project all the way to end of life of an asset. So within a system. So from a process perspective, we cover every aspect of that. Then that's when we lean on the technology colleagues to talk about how do we ingest sensor data and bring that up into a meaningful way to match up with the master record in SAP.
Could we have a question in the front?
Yes, I actually have two questions. I'll try to mash them together in one.
Hopefully we have two answers.
Huh? Yeah, might be over quota on my questions. So one, certainly what you describe as a fully connected supply chain requires, a behemoth effort amongst a huge ecosystem of independent players that all have to come to some similarity in terms of process and use of the platform, right? So one question is if you can comment on the gap that you see currently in the market to where we get to that nirvana of a fully connected ecosystem for even just like one enterprise as one example. And then the second thing is, in order to make that decision, obviously we're all on a journey and IoT is becoming adopted gradually. And so in your experience, what are some examples of tipping points that make a company decide now is the time to do some project that takes their information, and fully digitizes it? So two questions. One is at the market ecosystem level, and the second is characteristics of a tipping point.
Do you want to take the market and I'll take the tipping point?
Sure. I think one of the answers we touched on right at the bottom of that slide says networks. And when you're talking about different companies working together in a global supply chain, you have to have visibility across multiple levels in the supply chain. And I think the key is, one of our, for example, we have a supplier network through the Ariba solutions that has the largest number of suppliers than any other network in the world. You can share information with all of your suppliers and visibility of all your suppliers' inventory. So regardless of the systems that they're using, we'd love them all to be using SAP systems. The reality is they're not all using SAP systems. There's multiple different systems out there. And that network capability allows you to share the relevant information with your suppliers, with your contract manufacturers. Because again, a large percentage of manufacturing is outsourced. You need visibility of those production facilities so that you can commit to your customers to satisfy that order, because you may not be manufacturing that product. So I think networks are one of the key elements of driving information, driving collaboration, driving visibility across the end-to-end supply chain.
Then from a tipping point, from a technology consumption perspective, I would say, I mean, the easiest examples is like disruptors in the market, and I'm sure everybody has heard, the Uber, Airbnb. A lot of those, that is one aspect, and it's not really. It may not necessarily be a disruptor in your market, but it gives inspiration to say, I see a viable working model over there. Can we actually change the way that we do business to take market share? In a saturated market, Kaiser Compressor, for instance, they were looking at it from two perspectives. Is that how can we gain a market share by doing something different and thinking outside of the box? And then how can we be actually more streamlined in our processes? We may be the incumbent, but can we actually make more profit internally? So this is where the leasing model then enabled them to take hold, generating new business revenue, but it also enabled them to they had a lot of machinery just hanging around not doing anything, because they would sell it and basically it would be sat at site maybe and just underutilized. And then normally what would happen is that they would lose the maintenance contract on that. So it was lost to them, but they would still be under warranty. I also see that, I came from a mobile world, and the very first time, Bluetooth came on the market. So when we talk about mass adoption, Bluetooth is one of these things that we all take for granted. Even this is talking to Bluetooth across there. But originally what it was all about standardization. No, there wasn't one particular way to actually connect a Bluetooth GPS system, these pucks they used to have onto mobile devices. So I'm talking Symbol, MC9090s back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it wasn't until Microsoft said, okay, this is the standardized way of actually connecting to a Bluetooth that actually the market took off. We got GPS built into the hardware. And so that sometimes is that catalyst. I mean, if we in data, it's all the hyperscalers. They're offering amazing, cheap storage capability with the low risk, but with great reward. So it's those type of inflections that I've seen from a technology adoption.
The other example I would give is, I think from a IoT perspective, the tipping point is the cost of the sensors, which is now ridiculously low. And also, I think as 5G networks become more prevalent, the ease of sharing that information, the bandwidth to share that information will be critical as well. There are other technologies that we're seeing examples of, like blockchain. Blockchains, like any other technology in many ways, are sometimes a technology looking for a solution at the start of its life cycle. But the tipping point of that is when you identify use cases that can span across industries or span across an industry or multiple industries. For example, we're seeing the CP industry looking at blockchain from a track and trace perspective at the moment as a great use case. But I think that technologies need to move from a proof of concepts to a proof of value is the tipping point, and those end-to-end use cases are usually the case, usually where we find it. Yes. And we hand over the baton.
So I'm in operations, chemical, and fibers. The SAP HANA Does it have all the capabilities that you talked about in terms of predicting failures and?
So HANA is a database. So it's in memory. So it's obviously the speed, and it has various services around the outside of it. So the way that SAP approaches it, you can have a line of business application solution with the built-in business processes, or you can go and build it yourself. So inside of HANA itself, there is a predictive analytics library where you can actually go off and build yourself, or you can, in digital supply chain and in a product perspective, we have predictive maintenance and service, which allows you to have those built in, and you then have the business process associated with it. So you have basically two choices of the way that you actually go about solving predictive analytics.
But HANA doesn't have the capabilities, so the solutions built on top of the HANA database provide the capabilities.
Thank you.
Now we're warming up.
So the integration of the kind of real-time sensor data into SAP,
Yes.
is SAP housing that information, or is it just utilizing the information from other sources?
So from data ingestion, it's always a wonderful thing. SAP has the capability of taking it directly from the sensor and then basically spreading it over dynamic time series data storage. So if you can imagine at the very top layer is your HANA database, which is obviously your most expensive but your fastest data. Then you can actually pass down into Vora, and then ultimately all the way down into like a hyperscaler, an S3 and an Azure. And the applications that we have are basically allow seamless access from that data. So for instance, if you looked at a month's worth of data, that would be aggregate, would be based in HANA, but you could actually drill down without actually noticing you were changing data sources all the way down to sub-second. This is what's going on with this particular sensor feed. So does that answer your question? Partially?
Yeah, my question was more along the framework of, I think most of us have real-time data historians where we store a lot of this information. And, currently our transactional data largely lives inside of a system like SAP. And I think we've had issues, in the past with merging those two. And so I was just curious whether, you were actually storing that data, inside of this system. So it will be called a digital twin or whatever you want to call it, but a second location where some of that data is stored.
So, we have multiple, OSI Soft, lots of our customers have that data historian. Excuse me. And basically what we do is we can take a feed from the OSI Soft to take that and define a data model in order for ingestion into the SAP landscape, let's say. And then that basically enables us to maintain the digital thread. Inside of SAP, we have multiple digital twins, in essence. There's different definitions of it. Even going from the basic technical object hierarchy inside of plant maintenance to a PLM technical CAD drawing. They are digital representations of a physical object. What we see is it's all about merging and making sure that the rules are in place, that a sensor feed for a centrifugal pump is being brought into the data model, so I can actually look at the health score. So we translate those the algorithms into basically a score between a 0 and 100, and the more healthy that particular asset is based on the algorithm that we've applied. Typical case for assets is principal component analysis, that you can then start to see that in a visual way on a map, but you can then also compare other assets of similar type with the same on the same map and do a filter.
But the detailed information is still in the historian in that case, and the extract is in the...
Yeah, so you then you extract an
the back.
Is it?
Just got a side comment. If we're gonna you have tons of ways to get the map on NTT, and SAP is one of our partners. There's tons of ways to get that data. If you mention some of the visualizations, you can't connect to OSI, you can connect directly to PLCs. There's
Thank you for that. A beer this evening, I think.
Well, I think we're out of time because we were meant to. Oh. So
Any more questions, or should we?
Oh, one at
there's
the back.
one in there. Yes, sir.
The asset intelligence network, is that something, is there only one of those that SAP runs that all suppliers use and the customers do? And, customers create their own asset intelligence network? How's the information flow?
So it is all. So there is one instance of a asset intelligent network. I don't want to be flippant with your answer, but a Facebook of one isn't very friendly, But I mean, that's the essence, is that you have both operators on there, and you have security within them, their own sort of like sandbox area. So it's not like your information is shareable with other operators. And basically what you do is you invite manufacturers into that space to then provide information about the assets that you own. And it's in that space. We've then got external partners providing digital content to then, so Utopia, for instance, they're a master data governance company. They have a lot of the models and templates already predefined that you can then just purchase, which you can then basically develop out your technical object hierarchy into ISO standards. So if you wanted to go, 14224 or 55001, those type of standards you can maintain in that space.
So the ISO hierarchy is maintained in AIN and then downloaded into PM?
Yes, yes. So we could do model templates. There's E-class. There's about 12 standards that we actually subscribe to maintain for the object, for the creation of the parent classes. And then what you do, you then instantiate copies of that for your different variants of your assets to then deploy down into PM.
I think we're out of time. So if anyone has any additional questions or just fancies a game of foosball, please come to our booth this afternoon and we'd be happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.